The Lost Fleet. RK Part 3. Flag Bridge. Karelian Cruiser Freedom. High orbit above Gerantham. The final tally is up along with our best estimate of enemy losses. Piet came next to the chair where I was vegetating after using battle meditation before getting the chance to fully recover after atresia. Only a cocktail of stimulants and alchemy-produced concoctions kept my head more or less in the game, something that was necessary. In less than an hour representatives from Gerantham would be getting on board to discuss the aftermath of the battle, and I needed my head straight for that talk. "Tell me our losses first," I ordered. Piet looked at the datapad in his hands and nodded grimly. "We lost 11 Vinotas, with 16 more suffering various degree of damage. At least 4 won't be able to keep up with the fleet. Perhaps 2 more. Damage assessment is still underway there." My aide began listing the bad news. To think that the battle began so well, before my luck finally ran out. The assault ship losses are even worse. 17 acclimators are confirmed destroyed. 2 more are little more than wrecks for the breaking yards, with 6 damaged. Another pair will need an extensive stay in a shipyard before they could be considered combat capable, Piet continued. His tone reflected his thought on our victory. It was better than getting killed by the separatists, but that was all you could say about it. If it wasn't for my gamble with the battle meditation when it became clear we were losing, this battle could have seen my entire command annihilated. Only the Freedom and a few lucky ships might have made it out of the melee, considering how many of the enemy frigates and destroyers went on suicide runs when everyone lost control of the engagement. The heavy cruisers got gutted, sir. 6 lost, 1 is a wreck and another got its engines torn out by a ramming attack. The good news continued to come. The only good thing after this debacle was that the Confederacy had only one remaining task force that could engage us anytime soon. It should be arriving at Nuthoyan soon, and I had dispatched scouts to keep an eye on them and apprise me of numbers and force composition. Even with my fleet maul, we should have more than enough forces to crush that bunch. The Freedom by herself should be able to do so comfortably. Our escorts took the brunt of the casualties. Piet grunted. 18 light cruisers, 24 consular frigates and 59 of the CR-90s are destroyed. While most of the remaining frigates are combat capable, the preliminary estimates are that at least 10 of the light cruisers won't be able to leave the system without extensive repairs, Piet concluded. "What do we have left that can get underway in the next 24 to 48 hours? I asked. Piet turned his attention to the datapad he was holding and began typing commands. "If we wasted too long here, Eriadu could fall, and if that happened, the Confederacy would be able to concentrate their remaining forces in the nearby sectors against us. We needed to relieve that planet and make sure we wouldn't be intercepted by superior forces before I would be able to use battle meditation again. It was another question how well I would be able to handle the technique without a few weeks, perhaps a month of recovery time. This is my best guess, sir." Piet handed me the datapad. 1 Karelian cruiser, Freedom, lightly damaged. 10 Vinotas, including 1 silencer equipped, /3 light or moderately damaged. 12 acclimators, /4 light or moderately damaged / 2 dreadnought heavy cruisers, /1 moderately damaged / 9 light cruisers, /5 lightly damaged / 11 consular frigates, /3 lightly damaged / 15 CR-90 frigates, /2 lightly damaged / I was left with a quite powerful fleet even without counting the Freedom or the silencer. However, it was a pale shadow compared to the forces I had before engaging the enemy. Speaking about the separatist bastards, I browsed the data on the pad until I found the estimates. 300 munificent frigates, 144 recusant light destroyers, 22 Luckery Hulk battleships, 71,000 fighters. If true, I had just won a great victory. And the only reasons why my whole command hadn't been wiped out were the battle meditation and the incredible firepower and defenses on the Karelian cruiser. I wouldn't be able to rely on the former for the time being. Even worse, with the loss of so many ships, the chain of command was in tatters, and what remained of the fleet would be less effective now that I would be unable to cheat. I needed to discuss our situation with both Joanna and Vex, though unless there was something I hadn't considered, our best course of action was simple. We simply had to relieve Eriadu and hope that some of the forces there were still reasonably intact. Otherwise, fighting my way to Camino might turn out to be a pipe dream. Good job, Piet. Go make sure that the ships in best condition receive priority on supplies and parts for the repairs. We'll be leaving in 2 days at the latest. I want a confirmation on what portion of the fleet will be combat capable and able to keep up at flank speed, both in hyper and real space. I'll make sure of it, sir. My aide saluted and left after I handed him back the datapad. Now I had to finish preparing to meet the locals. =RK=. Joanna got back from her inspection on the Freedom a few minutes before our visitors arrived and crashed in a seat next to mine. While she had done a great deal of progress, Holt was far from being at 100% after Atrizia will be 10% down in combat capability until we can get back to Corellia and the shield systems are damaged. 12 to 15% below maximum until the engineers could overhaul some of the components. We'll need at least a week or more of safety for that. Guardian effectiveness is down 30% due to destroyed weapon emplacements and sensor clusters. We can bring it back to 90 with the spares on board. Joanna grumbled. She was obviously pissed off that her ship had taken such damage, no matter that any lesser spacecraft would have been gutted by such amount of punishment. I wisely didn't say aloud that all things considered we got off lightly. Did you go over the dossiers of our guests? Joanna asked after a short silence. Her tone told me all I needed to know about her feeling as far as the locals were concerned. Yes. There isn't much we have in our database, most came from Vex's ship. All we got was names and job description. I answered. Not much to go on. They didn't aid us until it became clear we were going to win. Holt grumbled. True. At least they saved a few of our ships. While my battered force could take on the locals, thanks to the Freedom, any further engagements here weren't going to gain us anything. I needed them as either reluctant allies or neutrals willing to take Republic credits at worst. Otherwise I might be forced to write off most of my damaged ships and reduce the locals' naval presence in order to keep them from aiding the enemy. The situation was less than ideal. Many more were crippled or destroyed because they didn't come to our aid when we really needed them. Holt growled. I'm less than pleased, Joanna. You can trust me about that. If I had my way, I would see the locals paying for what was at the very least gross incompetence and at worst treason. While I wasn't going to get what I wanted, I would be content with receiving what my fleet needed right now. Properly dealing with the Gerentham government could wait until the war was resolved. Getting into another fight right now won't serve our interests, no matter how much certain parties deserve to be turned into space dust. Holt nodded stiffly and glared at the door. =RK=. Part 4. Flag Bridge. Corellian Cruiser Freedom. High orbit above Gerentham. For what little it was worth it, the dossiers were correct. The two visitors led in by a Corps-Sec escort were splitting images of the pictures we had in our database. General Vale, Admiral Holt, welcome to Gerentham. I wish we met under better circumstances. An aging man wearing the light blue uniform of the local navy greeted us. I'm Admiral Neo Lid, commander of the Gerentham Naval Forces. He introduced himself. Lid was a human with short graying hair and piercing brown eyes. He had beard that reminded me of Kenobi's, though the Admiral's was shorter. Next to him stood a tall middle-aged woman. She gave us a small formal bow and a smile that didn't touch her eyes. The Fig Consortium welcomes you to Gerentham. I'm the CEO, Marissa Fig. The image in our files obviously failed to capture the woman's presence. While she had striking features, tall cheekbones, a face that was a product of either great genetics or a plastic surgeon, probably both, what got my attention it was the air she carried around her. The man was a predator accustomed to getting what she wanted by any means necessary. Her presence here told me a lot. Instead of a diplomat or another high-ranking member of the government, it was the CEO of one of the biggest corporate ions on the planet who came to represent Gerentham's civilian leadership. Admiral Lid, Miss Fig. I kept my voice bland, disinterested. You will provide basing, supplies and repair facilities for my damaged ships as well as resupply for the rest of my fleet. I'll be taking a third of your battle line along with appropriate escorts to relieve Iriadu. You'll be suitably compensated by the Republic Treasury for your troubles. Resupplying your fleet and aiding in its repair won't be an issue. However, given the unsure times we live in, waiting for payment from the Senate won't be acceptable. Fig's smile never wavered. For all we know, the funds to cover our expenses might not be available considering what is happening in the Corps. I'm afraid that we'll need every ship we have to protect Gerentham, General. Lyd managed to look quite apologetic. Considering the number of separatist forces that assaulted this system mere hours ago. The Admiral gasped for breath when I focused my will through the force and constricted his airways. Are you two along with your government under the impression that this is a negotiation? I made sure my voice sounded amused. Gerentham is a republic world. When two republic fleets engaged superior separatist forces coming in to conquer your planet, your fleet declined to offer any support until it was clear who was going to emerge victorious. The amusement in my voice was replaced by ice. Your only saving grace is that you chose not to openly side with the separatist, Admiral Lyd. Otherwise, right now my forces would be making sure that Gerentham would be unable to provide any support for the enemies of the Republic. I let my grip on the man's throat go. Even such a small thing set my nerves on fire, though I managed to keep my neutral expression in place. You won't get away with. The man bristled. Spare me. You're obviously put up to take all the blame, Admiral. When my report of the battle gets back to Coruscant, the Senate will want someone's head for the failure of the Gerentham's navy to engage the enemy before the battle was won. I can assure you, Gar High Command will want the same. Have a half of your fleet ready to depart in 36 hours, Admiral Lyd. You'll be leading them. If you distinguish yourself at Eriadu, you might even save yourself from taking all the blame. Dismissed. I looked at the CEO, who kept an unwavering mask in place, yet I could sense she was disturbed by my actions. Lyd glared at me, however he gave us a stiff salute before turning around and marching out of the compartment. Are you going to dictate terms to our government and corporations too, General? Fig asked. Her voice held a trace of amusement and was otherwise calm in direct contrast with the emotions coming from her. There was a bit of fear, a lot of anticipation and not a little anger and indignation that I could sense. It can be arranged. If you decline to deal with the Senate's treasury, I'll have to simply requisition what my fleet needs, I said. Doing so will earn you and the Republic a lot of enemies not only on Gerentham but in this whole sector. Fig countered. So far you've proven yourselves anything but friends to the Republic. Sooner than later, there would no longer be place for such indecisiveness in this war. My bet is on sooner. That's a bold claim, General. You aren't speaking for the Senate, Fig said. I don't have to, I chuckled. With this offensive the Confederacy and those supporting them, openly or not, committed the one sin the Senate won't forgive. They're proving themselves a credible threat for the core worlds. Can the Republic count on the Fig Consortium or should I contact your competitors? They can't provide you with everything you'll need in any reasonable time frame. The CEO sounded very sure of herself. If I'm not working with your corporation, there is nothing stopping me from simply requisitioning the necessary equipment from you and blacklisting your consortium in both Republic and Mandalorian space. Fig stared at me in disbelief. That certainly wasn't what she was expecting, even after she saw me deal with Lyd. It won't be so simple and I will know it, General. Fig protested. You mean your people might prove difficult? Alter or destroy manifests, misplace or sabotage equipment? I'll consider anything in that vein as treason and Gerentham siding openly with the Confederacy. You people already proved yourselves as unreliable. Treason isn't a big step down. The Senate won't stand for this, Fig snapped. On the contrary, there will be enough senators eager to make an example of an Outer Rim world, especially a sector capital if it means it might keep the other in line. After all, too many of the worlds in the Outer Rim openly sided with the Separatists. And you wonder why? Fig sneered. It's obvious actually. The problem you people had in my time are simply worse nowadays. I nodded. Their mistake was in backing the wrong side in this civil war, Miss Fig. Not if the Confederacy wins. They had the opportunity to achieve a military victory months ago and squandered it. This offensive of theirs will cause a lot of damage. I made a dismissive gesture. All it's going to achieve in the end is prolonging the war and getting even more people needlessly killed. I'll ask you again, Miss Fig, can the Republic work with your consortium or not? We'll provide what you need, Fig said through gritted teeth. See that you do. I'll hold you personally responsible for any accident. Have a nice day, Miss Fig. I slumped back in my chair when the woman left. What happened with being reasonable? Holt snorted. I didn't hear you utter a word. You're in charge of this fiasco and actually could speak for the Republic. As you very well know, right now the situation between Corellia and the Republic is complicated.
Besides, I agree. We can't trust the locals.
That's why I want as much of their fleet at Eriadu.
I nodded.
You intend to place them in the position of most danger. Joanna raised an eyebrow after she reached that conclusion.
That too.
I'll want to give a fighting chance to our crippled ships. We'll have to leave here anyway if the locals get any ideas.
I admitted.
Who knows, they might even see sense. After all, once we've relieved Eriadu, the Separatists won't be able to spare the forces for another major push in the region for some time.
There's that.
So this is your idea of gaining reluctant allies? Joanna asked.
I'll admit that mine wasn't the best possible approach.
However, my patience for self-serving politicians is gone after my last dealings with the Senate. Please advise our people to keep a close eye on our hosts. It's unlikely that they'll do something particularly dumb with the freedom around, but I've learned not to underestimate people's stupidity. I slowly got up to my feet and groaned as my body protested. I needed to get some shut-eye before I criffed up even more. Interlude, the unknown enemy I equals RK equals. Safe house. Coruscant. A human male who appeared to be middle-aged sat behind a desk in a small comfortable apartment he had been calling a home for the last decade. He had spent most of that time acting as an information broker, providing the movers and shakers on Coruscant with all the dirt and juicy rumors they craved. His work and all the contacts he made while doing it was in fact very close to his real one. The man who was known as Alan Gray was a spy, one who worked for a power unknown in this galaxy. The agent put aside the datapad he was examining and put it next to a stack of pads, then pulled out a data chip from his pocket and inserted it into the terminal built into his desk. He typed his password, waited for a biometric scan and began writing his impressions on the topic that had his attention at this time. The war wasn't going as expected, which wasn't exactly a bad thing. The more the locals tore themselves apart, the easier his people's task would be once they arrived in force. However, there were some wild elements that needed to be studied and accounted for in the report to the fleet masters and the Shapers. Gray was busy studying the actions of one such anomaly. Even after pressing all his contacts for more information, he knew less than he needed about the man. The spy frowned as what he knew began taking shape on the monitor. First he concentrated on the man's major actions and achievements to date, with more to be added as it became available. Once that was done, Gray was going to open another file where he would be adding his conclusions and theories based on the facts he had. Rhodia, bodyguard duty. Vale is hired to act as Senator Amidala's bodyguard, when she is betrayed by her longtime friend, the Rhodian Senator Fur. Del Qatar engages Sistroid contingent on the ground and dispatches it. After securing the site, Vale persuaded Fur to aid him in setting up an ambush for separatist reinforcements who are en route to pick up Amidala. The ambush is successful and Del Qatar eliminates the Sis contingent, including 2 Dark Jedi twins, Karok and Vinrock, trained by Dooku. He also captures Newt Gunray, who was eager to get his hands on Amidala. Reinforcements led by Jedi Master Shark T and Padala and Ahsoka Tano arrive at that time. A delay follows while the powers that be on Coruscant decide how to transport Gunray to the capital. Vale insists to accompany his captive in order to ensure he is safely delivered. Thanks to the delay, the Separatists have enough time to mount a rescue and assault the Republic cruiser Tranquility with Gunray, Vale, Shark T and Ahsoka Tano on board. During the ensuing battle, T and Tano engage Ventress while Vale is dealing with another of Dooku's Dark Acolytes and various droid units. The result is a dead Dark Jedi, multiple clone casualties. Gunray and a traitor in the Senate Guard who was supposed to deliver the captive for interrogation are killed by Vale while attempting to escape. At that point, Grievous arrives along with Sis reinforcements to make sure that Gunray is either rescued or silenced. Vale launches an Torrent fighter along with all 7 Ving pilots in an attempt to slow down the enemy until reinforcements could arrive. Meanwhile, back on Rhodia, an ensign who has the bridge watch on the acclimated Dauntless gives the order to immediately launch. The assault ship is the first to arrive to aid the Tranquility and turns the tide of the battle. Vale acts for and receives infantry support from Piet, then leads a raid to capture Grievous along with Jedi Shark T and Ahsoka Tano. Vale engages Asajj Ghea Ventress and captures her. At the same time, Shark T and a platoon of clone troopers run into Grievous and manage to subdue him. The consequences are profound. With Grievous captured, the Sis war effort staggers, giving the Republic forces across the galaxy a sorely needed reprieve, no matter how brief. As a consequence of his success, after all it was Vale's idea to go after Grievous, the Sith is offered a commission in the GAR by Chancellor Palpatine, which he accepts. Naboo, the Blue Shadow Crisis. A tactical droid is taken out by local forces. Slicing into its systems leads to the discovery of a Sith research facility in the swamps. The Queen and Senator Amidala requests Jedi support. Vale is dispatched to resolve the situation with a promise for Jedi support once it becomes available. By the time the general arrives, Senator Amidala had gone ahead to investigate and had been captured. Vale along with a clone unit under his command assaults the research facility, which turns out to be a bioweapon creation lab ran by Dr. Vindy. During the assault, unknown agents release the weapon in the river passing through Theed City. Before containment could be enacted, a huge portion of the water network on Naboo is contaminated and the planet has to be placed under quarantine. Vale interrogates Vindy and finds out what he needs to produce a cure. A Republic task force goes to the world of Thousand Moons where a certical component for curing Blue Shadow could be found. There Vale meets Jabo, a local orphan who he takes as his first apprentice. The necessary substance is retrieved and production of Blue Shadow cure begins immediately. However, it remains necessary for Naboo to be under quarantine until the bioweapon on the surface could be eradicated. The Republic Navy is forced to station quite a powerful fleet to enforce it. As a consequence of the casualties who die before sufficient amount of the cure could be produced, a radical shift in Naboo societies begin. Within months the majority of the population loses their pacifistic ideals and begin the creation of proper army and navy. They request technical assistance from the GAR forces maintaining the blockade and receive it. Another consequence is the effect the bioweapon attack has on the Confederacy's image. Their credibility take a major hit and many who were supportive of their stated agenda begin to have second thoughts. All Confederate declarations of innocence are considered mere propaganda. The raid on Coruscant. Shortly after Vale returns from Naboo, Sith forces and mercenaries hired by the Separatists execute a daring raid on the Republic capital. Using infiltrators, sleeper agents and a freighter low-def with orbit-to-surface weapons, Confederate forces attack Coruscant. GAR High Command is struck by bombs built into various maintained droids, including some containing Blue Shadow. In one fell swoop, the Republic military's staff is decapitated. At the same time, the freighter Tranquility executes a series of orbital strikes at the GAR bases nearest to the Senate. Again, Blue Shadow is used in order to slow down any response. Further, the Senate is taken over by mercenaries and commando droids. Chancellor Palpatine under duress orders the release of General Grievous. After contacting Commodore Palion in orbit, General Vale is updated on the situation and assumes command of the GAR forces on Coruscant. He intercepts Senator Taff, who is carrying the orders to release the cyborg, and Grievous remain in Republic custody. While Coruscant is gripped by chaos, a Sith strike force attacks the Jedi Temple. It is comprised by an unexpectedly large number of Dark Jedi who manage soon get the upper hand thanks to the element of surprise, droid backup and the fact that most Jedi are spread all over the galaxy. General Vale, who was on his way back to the Senate, diverts and moves to reinforce the Jedi along with what forces he has managed to gather. In the chaos, one of Dooku's acolytes, Kadrian Sane, acts a rescue. While they make their way out of the temple, Mace Windu intercepts them. At roughly the same time, Ventress is freed too and she goes to join the battle. In the Jedi Temple's Great Hall, Ahsoka Tano, Barriss Offee and Nadav are among the Jedi fending off the assault. Offee is critically wounded. Tano is injured and stunned. When Ventress attempts to execute the Togruta Padawan, Nadar intervenes and takes the blow, dying to save his comrade. Vale and clone reinforcements arrive turning the tide. While Dooku and Say escape, the rest of the Sith forces are decimated. Vale engages Ventress and kills her. He also injures the leader of the attack in the Great Hall, however then he heals her and takes her as a prisoner. In time she will take the name of Arya Astra and become Vale's second apprentice. Mace Windu attempts to arrest Vale for being a Sith. He is dissuaded from that core of action by Yoda, who senses the hostility of the clone troopers present in the temple. A consequence of that attempt is that Windu is later stripped from his position as a Jedi Master and sent to the front lines attached to a commando unit. General Vale makes his way to the Senate where forces under his command secure most of the building and arrest the Chancellor. Then he leads an assault on the Senate chamber where most of the senators are held as hostages. Despite the mercenaries' and CIS forces' best efforts, including the detonation of bombs containing the Blue Shadow bioweapon, Vale manages to rescue a significant portion of the senators. The aftermath of the raid on Coruscant is profound. With GAR High Command had been crippled, a reform is implemented. Command of the Republic Armed Forces is officially divided in two branches: Direct Action Command in charge of all combat forces and Logistical Branch, taking over the rest. General Vale is given a promotion and for all intents and purposes becomes the Supreme Commander of the Republic military. General Talar Valentra is promoted to take over the Logistics Branch. They implement reforms in the chain of command which hits the Jedi generals hard. The Jedi commanders are evaluated and only a third of them retain their ranks. The rest are demoted and put in charge of smaller formations according to their skills or even placed into commando units. The effect of the reforms is soon felt as the Republic military becomes more effective as a result. The raid on Coruscant is universally condemned. Corellia changes its stance and begins covert negotiations with the Republic about joining the war effort. The separatist cause takes another major hit. The liberation of Ryloth. This operation was General Vale's first real test after assuming command of GAR's combat branch. The operation is overall a resounding success both in space and on the ground. Weaknesses in existing doctrine are identified and steps are taken to resolve them, something which will have a profound effect during the ground portion of Second Geonosis. The liberation is notable for its hit on the general population of the Republic. The discovery of separatist attempts to sell large portion of the Twi'lek population into slavery to the Hutts enrages the Republic. Recruitment efforts strengthening after the raid on Coruscant saw. Corellia officially condemns the Confederacy's actions in the past few months and enters a military alliance with the Republic. Wat Tambor is captured on Ryloth and forced to give up his deactivation codes which shut down the majority of the droid armies on the ground. As a consequence, the Confederacy stops adding hardwired shoot-down command into its droid armies. The liberation of Ryloth was the first debut of the Guardian system, one of the weapons that changed the face of space warfare during the Clone Wars. Second Geonosis. This is General Vale's biggest test to date. Republic intelligence receives information that experimental droid factories would soon be completed on Geonosis and that the planet has mostly recovered after the first battle of the war which was waged there. The Confederacy heavily reinforces that world both on the ground and in space, daring the Republic to attack. General Vale receives authorization to eliminate the threat of the experimental separatist weapons and neutralize Geonosis as a theater. To achieve those objectives, he assembles one of the largest single fleets seen since the beginning of the conflict, First Assault Fleet. Vale's plans for assaulting Geonosis are torn asunder when General Anakin Skywalker goes rogue and takes a dozen Ventor cruisers in an ill-conceived attack upon the Separatist stronghold. While Skywalker caused an unexpectedly high amount of damage, his forces annihilated with only his flagship surviving long enough to crash land. After the Republic Navy secures the orbitals hours later, Skywalker is rescued along with any survivors. The Jedi Knight is then placed under arrest to await a trial. In response to Skywalker's stunt, General Vale is forced to attack before he is ready. He reveals his skills in the mythical technique of battle meditation, which turns the tide of the space battle for Geonosis. While First Assault Fleet suffers significant casualties, the Confederate presence beyond Geonosis orbit is eliminated within hours. Second Geonosis is notable for the first mass deployment of the Guardian system, which was vital in dealing with CIS vulture swarms. More new technologies were used in numbers on the ground, new weapons and armor along with a new method of orbital insertion, which was vital in securing the planetary shield generators and allowing significantly easier assault on the planet. A major change from previous GAR operations was the unrestrained use of orbital bombardment on any targets with military or dual use, including but not contained to spaceports, industrial centers and logistic hubs. By the time Geonosis surrendered, its economy, industry and transport networks were wrecked. Conservative estimates of the local civilian casualties due to the orbital strikes is in the hundreds of millions. More are estimated to die due to exposure and disruption in water, food and medicine distribution. The raid on Mandalore. After Geonosis, General Vale was dispatched to Mandalore to negotiate an alliance with Duchess Satine Kaiser's new Mandalorian government, which at the time was opposed by Pre Vizsla's Death Watch. Even now, months later, details are sparse. What is known for sure is that General Vale married Bo-Katan Kryze, the Duchess' sister, in a dual ceremony when Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi married Satine Kryze herself. Hours later, a separatist fleet led by General Grievous, who had been freed by an unknown Parry, assaulted Mandalore. They were aided by Death Watch members who disabled the planetary shields. As a consequence, the capital city of Sundari and the surrounding area were bombarded by the Confederacy force, which was simultaneously engaging the Mandalorian Defense Fleet and Republic Task Force under the command of Commodore Gilad Palion. The battle ended with the arrival of Republic reinforcements led by the Corellian cruiser Freedom commanded by Captain Jonah Holt. The end of the engagement saw the complete destruction of the Mandalorian Navy, Palion's task force and Grievous fleet, though the separatist general managed to make planetfall. In the aftermath, General Vale was elected as Mandalore. Meanwhile, General Kenobi led a strike team to recapture Grievous. The Jedi found the separatist leader and engaged him in combat, which resulted in Grievous' death. At Trizia, Vale led a containment fleet to engage a sapient bioweapon, which resulted in the destruction of the world. What was made publicly available of that Crimson Strain's capabilities was intriguing. Note to self: put all information about Crimson on a separate file and send it to the Shapers as a high priority. Carefully contact agents and try procuring a sample if available. Gray glared at the cliff notes. This Vale character was concerning. The Intelligence Directorate had been glad when the Sith managed to get themselves finally killed off 1,000 years ago, no matter what the warrior caste though of the lost of such worthy enemies. Those lunatics were disgraced anyway. Their failure was the primary reason why the Vong had been forced to fundamentally change and run in order to survive. Jedi, Sith. Bah. Couldn't all those bastards kill off each other and spare him the headache? The Lost Fleet. =RK=. Part 5. Republica 500. Coruscant. Anakin nodded stiffly to the squad leader of the riot police unit stationed at his wife's floor to keep reporters and other crazies away and got a cold acknowledgement in reply. Skywalker wondered if he'll ever see the day when most people he met wouldn't hold his action on Geonosis against him. Personally, he deemed the odds quite low. Skywalker got into the apartment he now openly shared with Padme and dragged himself to the fresher before discarding his clothes and getting under a fan of hot water. The training regiment instituted by Obi-Wan to get him into shape was running Anakin ragged. At least he had leave to go home in the evening, which was heaven after his imprisonment. Skywalker smiled when he heard the front door open. A moment later he was able to sense Padme's presence. The anger and resignation radiating from her wiped the smile off his face. Anakin finished his bath ASAP, got a robe from a nearby cupboard and went to see his wife. "Tough day, love?" Skywalker asked when he entered the living room. Padme had collapsed on the couch and just groaned something unintelligible. Anakin went to sit next to his wife and pulled her into a hug. Her very presence made the stress and frustration which were his constant companions for months subdue. "I'm not fine," Padme grumbled. "We finally got news from home. A frigate made it to a holonet transmitter in Hutt space. The fleet was forced to go under the planetary shield. Multiple landing sites were confirmed before the connection was cut." "I'm sorry. I should be there," Anakin grumbled. "I need you here," Padme mumbled. "General Typho should have things handled. Everything I've been cleared to see indicates that the army is well trained considering how new it is, and it's very well equipped. There are a lot of clones on Naboo too." Anakin tried to reassure his wife. He pulled her closer and began running a hand through her hair in an attempt to calm her down. "Everything feels wrong," Padme grumbled. "We're peaceful people. We shouldn't be training armies and building war machines." Padme shook with the outrage she felt. "I know. Believe me, I know how wrong this whole madness feels," Anakin muttered. Padme gripped his left arm and shifted so she could look her husband in the eyes. Her gaze was heavy with emotions. "That's what my mind says," Padme whispered. A tear formed in the corners of her eyes. "It's no longer what I feel." Her words were a harsh whisper. Anakin nodded numbly. The anger rising in Padme's chest was like a beacon that called to him. "Peace." A hollow laughter escaped her lips. "What did it get us? 2 invasions and a poisoned world." Skywalker could practically taste his wife's indignation. Every word she uttered, every admission made her anger burn hotter. "Padme, what happened on Naboo isn't your fault," Anakin said. "Isn't it? I was the queen and did nothing but utter hollow protests before running away to beg the Senate for help. We all know how that turned out. Now I'm senator and it took another invasion and the separatists using a bioweapon on Naboo to open my eyes. How isn't it my fault? Padme snapped. All you did was to stand up for your principles, love. That's something I admire in you, not something to be blamed for. Anakin did his best to calm down his wife. Tell that to all the people who died from the Blue Shadow. Tell it to everyone who will die fighting off another invasion. Padme raged. I will. Anakin simply nodded. Padme looked him in the eyes for a long moment and relaxed a bit. A small fond smile appeared on her face. The anger and self-recrimination she was feeling subdued a bit. I can't go on like this, Anakin. Padme muttered quietly. I can't go on and keep telling people that there must be peace. That this war has to end in anything but the destruction of the separatists. Her face hardened. I want them to pay for all they did to my people. To us. To me. Padme admitted. Skywalker held her tighter and felt her anger mingle with mortification at that confession. There was something in her expression, in the emotions she radiated, that made him shiver and swell with desire. I understand, Anakin whispered back. I know how you feel, my love. I feel the same way. There is a part of me that needs to make the separatists pay for all the pain they caused you. I need to make sure they won't be able to hurt you nor anyone else ever again. Those emotions go against everything I've been taught as a Jedi. Skywalker smiled sadly. I don't really care. You're what matters, my love. I'll do everything in my power to make the separatists pay for everything. Padme gazed in his eyes and smiled. There was no need to say anything else. They had an understanding, a pact. All the mortification and shame Padme felt melted away. They were replaced by determination and vindication. Her anger cooled down a bit and slowly turned into another kind of heat. Anakin smiled and leaned forward to capture Padme's lips in a searing kiss, which she returned eagerly. =RK=. Industrial District. Sundari. Mandalore. 3 days of heavy fighting, 4 waves of enemy reinforcements and almost total air superiority in the area was all it took for the separatists to break through the defenses surrounding the capital and land forces through one of the still gaping holes in the domes supposed to protect Sundari from the desert. The droid armies paid in fields of war machines turned into scrap and rivers of oil for their achievement. However they did it, the defenses were breached and the enemy began shuttling troops into the city. There were rumors about an armored force being assembled up seal the breach, however Arya didn't put much trust in that idea. While the new and inexperienced Mandalorian armored formations did well when on the defense, they were mauled badly by airstrikes and separatist armored thrusts. Astra was well aware of that fact. Omega Squad was sent more than once to take care of enemy infantry dropped behind the front lines, so she saw firsthand how the armored formations performed. On the other hand, most of the basilisks were kept in reserve until a good opportunity to use them decisively appeared. At least that's what the rumor mill said according to Dev. For all Astra knew, the war droids might have attacked and been crushed already. Omega, we're up, Nina shouted. The AA in the industrial district is being suppressed and the clankers are landing all over the place. We're moving ahead of 5th Sundari Regiment to slow down the enemy. Heavy reinforcements are 20 minutes behind us. So much for getting a bit of shut-eye. Atin grumbled. We got 4 hours off yesterday, I think. Arya frowned. The last few days were already blurring together. Get on the lot, Nina snapped and followed his own order. Arya and Omega Squad piled into the transport and it shot in the air before diving to street level. It was joined by 5 more Lance loaded to the brim with heavy-armed and even more pissed-off Mandalorians. No one bothered sealing the side doors, which let Arya have a great view of the part of Sundari they were flying over. The streets below were blocked by makeshift barricades with the odd strong point properly built by combat engineers. The buildings on the both sides were being turned into fortresses by platoons of Mandalorian warriors. Soon enough the QRF Omega was attached to reach the contested zone. Harsh sunlight poured through the breach in the dome giving the industrial area a haunting beauty which was broken by the flashes of firefights and explosions. Separatist assault transports and gunships were busy shooting up the defense perimeter surrounding the area around the breach, while others dashed in different directions to drop commando droids behind the defenders. Hold on, we're almost at the LZ. The pilot shouted. The LART accelerated even faster for a few seconds before getting to a jarring stop next to a wall surrounding a row of warehouse. "Go!" Nina shouted and jumped off the transport. Nearby Mandalorians in heavy armor with jetpacks were simply hurling themselves off the LARTs before flying at the nearest enemies. In moments heavy fighting erupted at the both flanks of the LZ. Arya shouldered the carbine she carried for mid-range work and to preserve her strength and scan the area. Omega Head was covered by the wall for the time being and there were no clankers in sight. "Arya, you're getting over first. Draw the enemy's attention. We're 5 seconds behind you," Nina ordered. The Sith in training nodded, put her gun on the magnetic clamp on her back and got her lightsaber before simply using the Force to jump over the wall. A droid tried to shoot her while she was descending, however she was able to deflect its fire. The clanker was still attempting to gun her down when the clone used grappling hooks to scale the wall and shot the droid before getting on the other side. "Right flank," Nina ordered. Atin and Arya moved to secure the corner of the closest warehouse and the rest of Omega followed. A Mandalorian flew above them and sent 2 missiles somewhere behind the next warehouse before diving away from a gunship that attempted to nail him. The Separatist machine froze in midair when a quartet of red beams speared through it, then promptly blew up. Arya glanced up and grinned when a basilisk flew overhead searching for other targets. A minute later Omega was sneaking up to the closest firefight. 2 squads of Mandalorians in painted clone armor had dug into the front of a warehouse and were ducking it with a platoon of SP and commando droids. The most of the machines were taking cover behind a ragged line of destroyed armor. Both Sis hover tanks and GAR provided walkers. "Throw smoke and we're flanking them before some of their friends turn up. Arya, you're on point. Fi, get on a higher ground and provide support. The rest form up on me," Nina ordered. 30 seconds later the sniper had found a perch on top of a nearby warehouse. Omega threw 5 smoke grenades and charged the enemy after they detonated. The droids rallied faster than expected and threw grenades at the advancing commandos. Arya stopped them midair and returned them to the sender. 10 ragged explosion later, Omega fell upon the enemy flank and began dismantling what was left of the enemy platoon. Less than a minute later it was all over. The defenders gave out ragged cheers, however the clones were already sprinting towards the next engagement. It was going to be another long day for Omega Squad. =RK=, Part 6. Bridge. Heavy Cruiser Warrior. High orbit above Eriadu. "Our situation is deteriorating," Rear Admiral Nils Tennant said over the comm. The man's expression was a textbook example of grim determination mixed with weariness. Brigadier Gideon Tarkin, the man in charge of Eriadu's own fleet and the forces he had built from the system defense navies of most notable worlds in the Seswenas sector, nodded in acceptance. "I have another regiment embarking. They'll be on the moon in 4 hours, Tarkin said. "For all the good it was going to do." "Thank you, Brigadier. If we lose the remaining cannons and the shield generator on the moon, we'll be done for." Tennant let out a relieved sigh. "Another regiment won't be enough to stop the Separatists. However, I don't dare pull out many more units. As of 2 hours ago there are 3 droid army groups down on Erida and they're pressing hard towards the shield generators and the capital." Tarkin grimaced. "We lack acclimators able to land and lift off afterward to easily shift forces anyway." Only 2 of the assault ships in the system were still operational and both were too heavily damaged to successfully land on the planet and then reach orbit. That left Tarkin relying on various shuttles in order to bring reinforcements and supplies to the moon. The Brigadier fixed his attention on the holotank showing the remaining Republic forces in the system. With the exception of the combined fleets pinned in place between Eriadu and her moon, there was a small task force playing tag with a much larger separatist battle group in the asteroid rings of the system's single gas giant. Technically speaking, Tennant and Tarkin had a powerful force at their disposal, one that was further augmented by the remnants of 4 theater fleets. However, most of those ships were damaged to one degree or another during the 2 weeks-long siege that led to their unenviable position. If it wasn't for the anti-orbital cannons still operational on the moon and the multiple Golan platforms dragged around the shipyards in geostationary orbit between Eriadu and its single natural satellite, the Loyalist would have been overwhelmed days ago. Even with those defensive advantages, only the presence of 2 gravity well generators completely locking up any attempt for hyperspace insertion in the middle of the pocket where the Republic forces were gathered prevented the enemy from successfully implementing its favorite ramming attacks. In the end, everything the Tarkin brothers and their extended family did, all the preparations they made in the build-up to this inevitable war, only meant that he was losing the battle for his home world slower. Ever since the enemy offensive began, Eridau had acquired a ring of destroyed ships, dead men and broken droids, which was a testament for the ferocity with which both sides fought. Despite heavy losses, the Confederacy continued to feed more material in the assault. The enemy simply had to remove Eriadu as a threat. The system was strategically placed to threaten multiple sectors and was at a crossroad of multiple hyperspace lanes. Taking Tarkin's world was going to tear out the heart of the whole Seswena sector, which would then fall relatively easy. That was a foregone conclusion when most of the system defense navies were here as a part of the theater fleets created by Gideon. The idea for drawing the bulk of the enemy forces hitting the sector to Eriadu by making the system a staging ground for raids in separatist space has been his. Tarkin knew his world would be assaulted anyway, and this way he not only had a better chance to hold it, but he was going to spare the other worlds he was responsible for. That was the plan. Unfortunately, it overlooked the sheer magnitude of the forces the Confederacy could bring to bear against the Republic in this grand offensive of theirs. It was a small miracle that instead of throwing more ships at Eriadu, the Separatists had decided to spend most of a sector fleet to lock down the whole western quadrant. Otherwise, the fact that 2/3 of the Republic sector fleet meant to protect that same territory wasn't here at Eriadu would have proven fatal. On the other hand, even their presence wasn't a magic solution. If Tennant's whole command was present, the same would be true for the enemy too, and the overall correlation of the forces would be roughly the same anyway. The Separatists are forming up for another attack. Tennant spoke quietly. Tarkin frowned. If he was in their shoes, Gideon would have waited for the droid army on the moon to crack the defenses there and take out either the cannons or the shield. Attacking while that firepower was still available was going to be expensive and likely futile. The Separatists had tried it multiple times anyway, and there was no indication it was going to work. That's weird. Tarkin's frown deepened. The symbols representing the enemy fleets boxing and the Loyalists were shifting all right, however only a third of them were assuming an offensive formations aimed at his forces. The rest were assuming defensive formations and maneuvering to face away from Eriadu. Brigadier, the enemy forces on the moon are starting another assault. Tarkin's liaison with the infantry informed him. Tell them to hold at all cost. Reinforcements will be arriving in a few hours. Gideon spoke absent-mindedly. Despite all the ECM thrown away by the Separatists, the Republic forces had no trouble detecting a decent-sized fleet exiting hyperspace a light hour from Eriadu. There were a lot of powerful scanners still operational on the moon and in the orbital segment under Loyalist control. The newcomers were obviously more separatist, probably called back from securing the rest of the quadrant. However, that didn't explain the enemy's actions. The Confederate forces appeared to be preparing to fend off attack, and not one coming from Tarkin's or Tennant's fleets. Sir, we're getting a lot of encrypted traffic between the newcomers and the enemy flagship. There's too much interference to get much of it. We're dumping the raw data to Intel for decryption and analysis. A member of Chakrin's staff reported. They're either putting an elaborate show for us or they'll put a spanner in their plans. He should be getting to the staging areas at this time. Perhaps a few days earlier if he was lucky in the unknown regions, Tennant chuckled. That would certainly explain it. Tarkin nodded. It won't matter if the good general's coming to relieve us if we aren't here when he arrives. Gideon added. I concur, Nils agreed. We'll just have to hold the line no matter what. RK equals. 2nd Platoon. Black Company. 41st Battalion The Grim Reapers. Eriadu's moon. Dex, get on the comm. We need air resupply. Sergeant Hound growled. The senior NCO was once again in charge of the whole platoon after the newest lieutenant managed to get himself killed last week. Fighting on the mostly airless ball of rock reminded Hound of Geonosis, with more droids, less bugs and no air to breathe. After just a week of R&R, the whole division had been hurried to Eriadu and ordered go hold the world at all costs. That in turn meant that they got thrown in the hottest fires thanks to the simple fact that they were one of the few units in the system fully equipped with the new weapons and armor. The former proved invaluable in holding the moon so far, because in that environment even an otherwise non-lethal glance could prove fatal. Things like the running out air supply of the platoon might very well kill them all before the clankers could. I'm on it, Sarge, Dex shouted back. Hound nodded in satisfaction and returned his attention to commanding. He was actually beginning to miss that competent Jedi who took command back on Geonosis. They sure could use a few of the blighters. We've got droidicas. A KNG, criffing new guy, from the local company helping hold the valley leading to the Iron Cannon shouted. Heavy 3, you're cleared to engage. Blue and red fire teams, provide support. Hound ordered after examining the situation. 20 or so of the destroyer droids had come uncomfortably close after being screened by a battalion of B-1s sent out to soak up the incoming fire. The blighters actually managed to deploy and activate their shields before coming under effective fire, and only one was disabled before it could be surrounded by its defense field. The droidicas laid down suppressive fire, which in turn allowed 2 SB companies to advance without too much trouble. In the evening twilight the firefight looked like something from a demented dream. The thin atmosphere was just the right composition and thick enough to make each shot appear as a much larger glowing bolt of fiery plasma moments after leaving the barrel of a gun. It was almost beautiful in a macabre sort of way. Black 1 to Black Actual, I need a fire mission at the following coordinates. Hound called command. Black Actual, Black 1, that's negative. All supports is engaged to capacity. Hold your ground, over. Copy that, Black Actual. The sergeant added a few quiet curses. Rock, bring in the reserve on the right flank. Hound ordered, before cursing again. The sergeant activated the zoom function built in his helmet and grit his teeth. An armor column was heading straight at the valley's entrance. It was screened by 10 speeder-mounted B-1s and followed by what looked suspiciously like a battalion worth of mechanized infantry mounted in APCs. Black 1, to Black Actual, be advised I have visual on heavy enemy forces moving our way. ETA 8 minutes. We need all the support you can get to us. Black Actual, Black 1, stand by. Dispatching reserves to your position. Over. Black 1, Black Actual, roger. Over. Hound grunted. Those reinforcements better hurry or they would be running right into a clanker armored spearhead. The sergeant glanced around. The only thing he had left was his command squad. Dex, make sure we get our criffing air and call in all the artillery support that becomes available. The rest of you boys, come with me. We have some uninvited guests to kick out. Hound ordered and began advancing to the right flank where his heavy weapon specialists were laying down the pain upon those droidicas.